Raw this week was absolute chaos. 50% of these reasons were good, and 50% are reasons that may just be individual to me, but I no longer understand. Because yes, distractions, interference, confusion, shenanigans, and all those words are just running wild throughout WWE. And while we have talked about it before, from my vantage point, and I want to stress and underline that, sometimes with content creation, you say something, and people are like, well, that's not a fair thing to say. You're right, because I'm not speaking on behalf of you. And if you love what WWE is doing and it gets you excited and it gets you pumped in your Tootsie Toes, I am not going to argue with you, because that would make me an a-hole. But it's become too much for me, which is kind of crazy, because I'm like the king and the lover of goofy wrestling for life. But I think it's because we have this sort of brand new heel group in the Vision, as they're now called, which is a silly name, but it will be fine. And I would have no problem with them stopping matches and running into matches, and of course Seth Rollins ensuring that CM Punk can never win, because that was the idea here. Seth Rollins hates CM Punk so much, he stole that World Championship from SummerSlam, and here, just when he was about to GTS Braun Breaker, I think it was, he gets in the ring, he pretended that he left, but obviously he hadn't left, and nobody would have believed him, or should have believed him, after all the lies with his injury angle. And then you kind of get a big smile, so I'll get to in just 1 second, because actually I thought Raw reprieved itself by the end of the night on one angle. But the issue is, in every other match on this show, you had Dominic Mysterio doing stuff, you had the Kabuki Warriors doing stuff, you had Raquel Rodriguez doing stuff. Like, apart from Becky Lynch, Maxine Dupree, which even had Natalya on the outside, I know it's not the same, but obviously Becky booted her at the end, I just think you are taking away from what Seth Rollins and Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker and Paul Heyman could be doing to wind up the crowd, because now it's just being a pro wrestler. In fact, the baby faces look like idiots now, because if all the heels are bringing out their buddies and they're all getting interferes, and sometimes you're getting wins off this, and the referees aren't doing anything about it, and Nick Aldis not doing anything about it, Adam Pearce isn't doing anything about it, baby faces should go, all right, we're going to start doing it too. The other issue I had here was it was the exact same setup from SmackDown, right? We started with no tag team match, we ended with a pretty big tag team match, which ended in disqualification with a bull shot by Logan Paul. Here we had no tag team match, and it ends with a tag team match. Now, LA Knight and CM Punk obviously didn't have the relationship that Cody Rhodes and John Cena had, and thankfully, once the four-way got announced, we're doing a four-way at Clash in Paris between CM Punk, Seth Rollins, Jey Uso, and LA Knight, which should be a good match, although Sami Zayn should be livid because Adam Pearce lied to him. But after that, because CM Punk celebrated so much, LA Knight got a little bit annoyed, and they started to scrap. Jey Uso took one in their face. Thank goodness we did that, because I thought it was a massive missed opportunity at the start of the show when LA Knight and CM Punk were friendly with each other. If this is the first time they'd interacted, fine. But as they did mention, they put all the story beats in there. Months ago or weeks ago, whenever the flub it was, LA Knight had been told by CM Punk, you're not on my level, which is a horrible thing to say. And last week, I mean, they each had their own vantage point of this. LA Knight felt like he'd stolen the world title away from him when CM Punk interfered. And CM Punk was like, Seth Rollins was going to stomp your head into concrete, so I was saving you. But that actually wasn't what he was doing. He just interfered because he hates Seth Rollins. To me, I would have much rather if all the animosity and all the anger and all the rage had kicked off at the start, so that CM Punk and LA Knight could have done more of a promo that Cody Rhodes and CM Punk did. My brain always goes back to that, because that was two baby faces. They both wanted to be the world champion, and they both had their own opinion, their own goals. You don't get in my way. I don't care that we both sit on this magical good side of being the baby faces. If you are sort of an obstacle, I will push by you. And I thought that LA Knight could have done that too. And listen, I love the fact that LA Knight's been elevated to this level. I don't think he's going to win the world championship. But a little bit more back and forth with Punk, which again, they can do next week, which is fine. Basically, what I'm saying is WWE saved themselves there. I don't need to see kissy, kissy, love, love all around. That's why I'm glad that Jey Uso got banged in the face as well, because he can now hate LA Knight, he can hate CM Punk. Well, he won't hate CM Punk because they're buddies. But I would always make sure that is the case, because I just think it makes wrestling more interesting, mostly proven by a CM Punk, by a Drew McIntyre, by Cody Rhodes, and by Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns doesn't act like a good guy. In fact, Roman Reigns hates anybody. But that was another plot hole that I got confused by. I thought the Jey Uso absence last week was going to be something, and it still could be, but he just went, I had family business. And then I went, well, some people think you may be lying about this, but not me. And we kind of just breezed past it. Now, of course, I am reacting here, and I really hope that I'm wrong, and in 7 days' time, when we get to the next week's episode of Raw, I could be like, oh, man, I screwed up by jumping on the gun. But I don't know, it's not bad programming by any stretch of the imagination. But a year ago, I always felt like WWE fired on all cylinders, and it felt like if you watched, you got rewarded, and you can kind of see where we were going, but then they would take unexpected turns, which also made sense. Now, I don't want to say it feels wishy-washy, that's way too extreme, but it doesn't feel as on point as maybe it would have done. And I think a big reason for that is because now, before every single match, I know that someone's going to run in, or I know there's going to be a disqualification, and that does suck. The one that really got me here was Sheamus was Sami Zayn versus Rusev. I love Sami Zayn. I love Rusev. And I was like, isn't it awesome in 2025 we get to have this match? And of all the people, it was the MFTs that turned up from SmackDown, which once again completely dilutes the brand split. And you just know there's going to be a draft that WWE goes, oh my gosh, it's missing having a draft, even though it doesn't actually mean anything. And I was disappointed in the wrong way. Like, I was sad I didn't get a winner because I thought, well, surely Sami Zayn will win. But then what do you do to protect Rusev? Because, of course, Rusev's going to have the match with Sheamus again, which we also set up here. Probably going to go down in Paris, I think, now. So my predictions video from yesterday is completely wrong. Although maybe they'll just do it on television again. And listen, the brawl between Sheamus and Rusev, always fun. Getting a bit long in the tooth because we've seen it so much. And Sami Zayn having a feud with Solo, that's okay. That's all right. Especially, I mean, could it end with Sami Zayn being the US champion or teaming with Jacob for 2? Not so sure about that. So we wait and see with that one. But I wanted to finish. And I wanted to know who was going to win and who was going to lose. And I think that WWE should have given us that. And then, of course, yes, you had a surprise roll-up by El Grande Americano in one match, and then you have the surprise roll-up by Roxanne Perez in the other match. And wrestling is a creative endeavor, so you can do whatever you want, right? You think about things, and sometimes you need to come up with a finish that makes people go, hot damn. How did you come up about that? I just think a lot of the things we are doing, I use the term lazy, which is so unfair, because I don't think anyone's in the back just going, man, we can do that. It's probably an oversight more than anything. And I don't know whether the left hand's not talking to the right hand and sort of agents have one roll-up finish so somebody else doesn't know they're doing another roll-up finish. But those two matches were sort of really close together. And so, yes, it does all kind of blur into one as opposed to standing out as its own little thing. So it did. It took away from it for me. But again, I know there'll be a bunch of people out there that love the carnage. They love the chaos. They probably compare it to the Attitude Era, which would be fair. And we have a lot of question marks as well that we need to figure out. Like, is Naomi really injured? Or is this another work? Now, I get worried about this, but everything now has become a work, right? We have to sit down and go, is this person hurt? Is Karrion Kross and Skull actually left the WWE? I quite like that one because I find it interesting. But you don't want to copy and paste it across the entire promotion because you want blurred lines, but ultimately I want my stories to be on the television. I don't always want it to be a meta thing because it's like shenanigans. If you do shenanigans all the time, they're no longer shenanigans. They're just part of your show. And if all of a sudden everything becomes a worked shoot, to use the proper terms, then that's just part of your show. So you can almost get rid of what you call it because it's just what you're going to get on TV. So we'll err on the side of caution and say that I hope Naomi is okay. Obviously, it meant we got Roxanne Perez versus Io Sky, which also set the seed for an Asuka heel turn, which makes me wonder if that's how they were going to get out of the Naomi match. I would presume the finish was exactly the same. Roxanne Perez was just put in there instead. Very interesting. I don't mind Asuka going heel. That's not true. I do mind a little bit because I think she's been so great since she came back that you could have elongated this. But a lot of this seemed to happen in fast forward because you got that, then Io Sky got mad at them, then Rhea Ripley even came in using exposition. LA Knight did that earlier with Jey Uso too. There was a lot of exposition characters on this Raw. But she walked in and said, of course you would have been able to beat Roxanne Perez because Io Sky was so mad. It was so funny. It's like when you're a kid and someone tells you you're not good at swimming even though you won a medal. You're like, I am good at swimming. Why would you say these things? Io Sky couldn't believe it. And Rhea Ripley was like, of course you could have beaten her, but maybe you do need to be careful around Asuka and Kairi Sane. Although Kairi Sane feels to me like she's not going to do that. But then at the same time, I suppose if they are like a bad guy tag team and Io Sky and Rhea Ripley are becoming best friends, you could do that match. And do you know how good that's going to be? Rhea Ripley versus Io Sky versus the Kabuki Warriors. So I did kind of feel like we went through it on 2 speed and it's already set up. But if I get that match, I'm not going to be mad about it. And actually, I thought the best thing on Raw was the Bayley sit-down video. I think it's a shame is too strong. I wouldn't have done the sort of over the top. Is that the right word? I don't know. But I wouldn't have done the sort of dramatic thing at the end when she pushed her head together and we got a funny effect and you heard her old heel laughter in the background. That was a bit too much to me, but only because the performance she gave before this I thought was so good and so real, and I actually felt like she was telling me her true feelings. I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. So then when you gave me the funny one-y stuff afterwards, it's like, it's taken away from the emotion a little bit because that is what she poured out here. Like, talked about she's been doing this for 18 years. She does see herself as a role model, but also she feels nothing towards this, essentially feels like she's a failure, and she blames herself. And without wanting to sound too crazy, there was a relatable aspect to this. I think a lot of us in our own lives can say, well, we did this and we did that, and yet sometimes we'll use the word again. We do feel a bit empty or a bit directionless, which she was saying about here now. And she talked about the last few months. I can't win, I lose. I screwed over Lyra Valkyria by accident on purpose, and obviously Becky Lynch is still standing tall. I would assume it's heading in a heel turn direction, but I did have a lot of sympathy and empathy for her. But great stuff. And that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to use the term shades of grey, because I think that's been overdone. But this was someone just talking to us as a real person. You can say she's a babyface, you can say she's a heel. But there was more to it than that. It was just, here's the information I want to give you and you can make your mind up. And I think we kind of fell into maybe a bit more structured characterizations listen, sometimes you do need those, not with a CM Punk and not with an LA Knight. They're too good as their personas, they're too good on the microphone. Just let them be them based on the things that did happen. Like, I don't think LA Knight, the character, would have shaken CM Punk's hand after costing him essentially the world title the week beforehand. But I'm also being mega nerdy there. I'll hold my hands up and admit that. But super excited for this Bayley thing. It was then hilarious because we cut to Lyra Valkyria, who acted like she'd been accused of murder. Well, that's not my fault. I think she could have been a bit more mad as well. But I presume these two are going to feud because we're not going to turn Lyra heel. And I think Bayley in a super serious bad guy role could be really good. I mean, what she did here was top stuff, and I've totally bought into it. And we're going to get Penta versus Xavier Woods next week, and Xavier Woods is wearing a tiny hat on this week's Raw. The New Day are tremendous, and there was probably some other things as well, but make sure you check out What Culture Wrestling to get my entire beat-by-beat review, and check out my new fitness channel. There'll be a link down there. If not, just search for Simon Miller Fitness. But it's a wibbly-wobbly Raw for me, and I felt this way for a couple of weeks. Again, I'm not saying that it's bad. I think sometimes people equate being critical, or at least trying to be constructively critical, with me saying, oh, WWE's the worst because of tribalism. I get it. But it's not hitting on the same cylinders that it was. And that actually does make sense because wrestling is cyclical. Sometimes you go up and sometimes you go down. Obviously, nobody knows more about that than I do. But yes, there's just something there that's not quite grabbing me at the moment, but that's okay because WWE isn't writing television for me. They're writing wrestling for all fans that are tuning in. And listen, they'll do something in December just to grab a random day that I love and somebody else will hate. That's just the way the world goes. But I think the four-way will be good. Like, I think it's there just as a way to ensure Seth Rollins doesn't get pinned, and you shouldn't be taking him off the world title right now. But given that you've got Cody versus Drew, and you've got Cena versus Logan Paul, and you're probably going to get Becky Lynch versus Nikki Bella too, and you've got that four-way for the world title, it's a pretty strong card. And of course, you could even have Dominic Mysterio versus AJ Styles in there, because Dominic did screw over AJ by using the metal plate in his mask, and you could probably do the title change too. And I think we'd all be happy with that if AJ Styles is going to retire. He gets one last title run. But the DIC, the distraction, interference, and confusion, needs to be toned down. And I think we should look around everyone and say, get Logan Paul doing it. He's meant to be a dickhead, but he's not on Raw. On Raw, this should be the sole belongings of the Vision, and they should deliberately be winding you up doing it. And why would I'm repeating myself, but why would I get wound up by it at the moment? I wouldn't. They're not actually doing anything that wrong. They're just essentially surveying the situation, going, well, if Adam Pearce doesn't care, why should I care? I don't think anything else happened. I'm probably wrong there. We kind of sort of teased El Grande Americano as part of Judgment Day now, but we don't know what version of El Grande Americano this is. Also, the Raw Tag Team titles have been totally forgotten about, and that hurts me deep down in my soul. I just do not understand it. It's totally wild and it's totally crazy. So, there is a quick recap of Raw. I apologize, it's not as long as usual, but I may have something cool on that I'll reveal to you soon. It means I have to shoot off today. But I really would like to know what you thought about Raw, so drop me a comment below. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the video on the screen to get more information about how I feel about wrestling, whatever that means. Otherwise, yes, new fitness channel. We talked about it. Grillermind.com/Simon get 10% off. There is 30% off some flavors at the moment in pre-workout. Best pre-workout ever. Patreon.com/Simon316 for my watch-alongs. Only $5. Super cheap. Simon316 on social media. Simon Miller on Cameo. Simon J. Miller on TikTok. And Pro Wrestling Tees and Big Cartel for merchandise. Otherwise, it's not that important. Wrestling is the most important of the least important things. But I would love your feedback. It's always interesting how people view these things. And I'll see you tomorrow.